All right. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 25 of Destination the Show. JD Cameron here, as always, with my guy Jeremy Niger. Jeremy, how are you?
I'm good. It feels like opening day baseball in the
It
Midwest.
almost is Friday for the Twins.
No, but I mean like opening
Oh,
day April weather in February.
oh
So I
yeah,
dig that. I dig that a lot. How are you doing?
doing well. Surrounded in my basement as we speak by approximately 200 boxes of Girl Scout cookies.
How many have you eaten?
I haven't eaten any yet, but trying to sell them is going to drive me to eating a lot of them.
So this is your plug to sell Girl Scout cookies
Yeah,
live on the pod. Love
that's
it.
right. That's right.
Just
100%.
plug your
Hit me up.
plug yourself, right? That's my thing too. Plug
There you
yourself.
go.
Okay.
All right. Some quick housekeeping stuff before we dig in. Excited to get back at it with you as always. You can find us on YouTube at Destination the Show, on Twitter at DTS_pod1, and wherever you get your podcasts. Ways that you can support the show: downloading our episodes, liking and subscribing, interacting with our content in any way that you see fit. And we appreciate it in advance. Jeremy, I got to ask you this, man, because I feel like you're a much busier person than I am. Like you have like a real job. Have you been able to catch any college baseball since it really got going last Friday? Have you seen any games yet, man?
I have not. As a matter of fact, Friday I don't think I was home at all.
Sad.
Then Saturday, I woke up, I put on the stripes, and I went and officiated a full day of basketball
Put on the stripes.
because
God.
I want people to just yell at this face, just tell me how terrible I am. And then as a reward, I treated myself to some adult beverages.
Okay.
And then
That's nice.
I don't even remember what Sunday was, but no, I the things I saw were the clips on Twitter, but mostly the things that come through are like the injuries, and I'm just like, son of a gun, it's happening already.
It's
So
all right.
I didn't. Let me set the over under on games you watched this weekend. At how many screens do you have available?
I'm only rocking 2 at a time, max, and
So
usually 1.
so 6.5.
Yeah, that's probably about right. And it's hard. It's impossible to say for sure because I would be like dabbling and flicking right for at bats at various guys or starts from various pitchers I was looking for. But super excited, man. College baseball is back. There were some good performances, and what this means is, and I sent you like a really overexcited like Twitter DM the other day. It's like embarrassing. I was like, Jeremy, I've written write-ups in the consensus board. They're actually happening. But that means that we're ready to start draft content on here, man. And I'm excited.
Yep. Um, I want to ask you a question that's not something that we scripted.
Yeah.
Is there a college player that you're more excited to follow this year than any other player?
Like one college player who I'm more excited to to follow than any other college player.
Yeah. Like who's the college player you're most excited to follow? Because I have a name that just jumps right to my head.
Yeah. It's hard because right like my mind immediately jumps to like who are the Twins potentially going to draft, and that's like such a challenge. That's going to be such a challenging range of the board to project. Like it's hard to project even the top of the board with this year's class. Just
Right.
like randomly, I'm going to say Vance Honeycutt, I think.
Okay.
Center
Which
fielder
you
from
were, and yeah. Well, finish your thought.
How you get right to jump on me. Here's why. Um, Vance Honeycutt is interesting to me because I think he embodies like a lot of what's the deal with this class, right? Which is like potentially incredibly exciting, loud tools, really great skill set with like a few really big question marks. Like there's so few guys in this class that are kind of like slam dunks. And as I started writing up a couple of left-handed pitchers this week, um, specifically Hagen Smith and Jonathan Santucci, like everyone has question marks with their profile, way more so than some of the guys that we covered last year. And obviously part of that is going to be its opening week and who cares what happened so far. But I do think it's fairly reflective of like the state of the board and the class, that there's just like every guy has some interesting questions. How about for you?
Well, it's hilarious that you said Honeycutt, because I just did a little search on episode 3. Okay, 22 weeks ago plus. The question was,
That's who you said.
who are the guys that interest you? And my number one guy was Vance Honeycutt, but for all the same reasons. Now, the guy that's going to intrigue me all year is Chase Burns.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I definitely got to tune into a little bit of his opening start. I think he ended up striking out 7 guys over 5 innings. Fastball touched 101. Just like absolutely ridiculous stuff. And if I remember, my guy from that conversation back in episode 3 or whatever it was JJ Weatherholt,
Right.
who has maybe started to kind of separate himself at the top of the board. Certainly part of a group of like 3 guys at the moment, but also picked up a hamstring injury this week, man. So
yeah, I heard that.
We'll see.
It's exciting. And even if you can't watch all these college games, there's going to be dudes that just do things. And you'll know the name of the guy that had three bombs in the one game, or 3 bombs this weekend. Did you see that?
Maybe?
I don't know. It was just like, yep, these are guys that are making a name for themselves in mid-February, which is a whole lot of fun. But Chase Burns at Wake Forest to me is going to be a very intriguing draft storyline, because Wake Forest just does things, and it's going to be fun. Anywho,
we are, so speaking of that, before we dig into what we're going to dig into today, I do want to put a kind of like shout out / like call to action / request for people, right? Because we were talking about this a little bit before the show. We want to start dabbling into draft content and start to talk about guys. And we're going to spend so much time talking about the class. We're going to talk about the demographics. We're going to talk about specific player profiles. I can tell you that there is now 215 names on the consensus board, which is so like light years ahead of where it was this time last year. Like, I don't know where I'm going to stop this year. But if you have strong feelings about how you want us to like present out draft content on the show, absolutely would love to hear from folks, whether that is like DM on Twitter, shoot us a tweet, shoot us an email, destinationtheshow@gmail.com. Let us know if you're ready for that, how you want to consume that, because we are definitely getting close to ready to start to ramp up like actual draft content on the show. And that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, for sure.
So today, and the next 3 weeks, really, we are going to be, we're in spring training mode, and the games are starting, dude. Friday, the Twins play the Gophers. That's crazy. We're going to do some top 20s. And we're actually going to do like, here's the format we're going to follow. We're going to do dueling top 20s. So we put our lists together side by side. We'll do the Brewers this week. We'll do the Cubs next week. We'll do the Twins the following week. And we're going to kind of walk through position 1 through 20, go through each one, and then we're going to stop at various points along the way, particularly when we disagree or there's a prospect worth highlighting, or we want to kind of dig into something that's interesting about a particular guy. Before we start, I should also name, we did not, I think we did the same thing here, right? Like, I did not rank any of the new international guys that was signed in this most recent signing period into any of the top 20s that we're gonna roll out. That's the same for you, right?
Yeah, I don't think I had any new guys on my list.
Too soon for that. So we're gonna dig in, and we're gonna start with the Brewers today. So are you ready to chop up a Brewers top 20 here?
Yeah, let's roll.
All right, cool. I'm excited. Okay, so I gotta say, man, like, I'm disappointed in us a little bit. Like, we agreed on a top 4, and I was like ready to like debate you right off the bat on something. Like, what's the deal? We're spending too much time together, clearly. But we'll quickly dig into. We'll quickly outline the top 4. So number 1, both of us, I think, fairly obviously the recently extended Jackson Churio, outfielder number 2. Both of us had catcher Jefferson Caro. Number 3, both of us had right-handed pitcher Jacob Mizorowski. He of the most insane, ridiculous stuff. And then number 4, both of us have Tyler Black, first base, third baseman. So I was a little bit annoyed that we both kind of had the same top 4 and surprised. Is there a guy out of those 4 who you're most excited to watch this season? And who is that guy and why?
So, yeah, I'm totally going to just take your question and answer it a lot of different ways.
That's all good.
Because as minor leaguers, Mizorowski and Black for different reasons, but Mizorowski has all these loud things, including the fastball, which is going to be super fun. And how is he going to develop as a starter, as a bullpen guy? Black, from the perspective of he might be able to help this 2024 team, and those types of prospects are fun to watch because it's like, when is he ready? When is the team going to deem him the guy that's coming up? Like, the timeline for him is fun, but the answer has to be Jackson Churio, right? He has to be the guy with all eyes on him because he is maybe not the number 1 prospect, but could be the number 1 prospect globally. Like you mentioned, huge extension. He's probably going to be plugged right into the outfield, have super high expectations. So how can it be anybody but him? I mean, it was like, as a Twins fan, Byron Buxton, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was just, you watched him. Everything was about him, and that's what this guy's going to do for the Brewers in a year that there's some question marks. But I'm certainly excited to see him, and living in Wisconsin, that's just a one channel down from the Twins game.
There you go.
The Brewers.
There you go. Do you get both? Do you get home the feeds of both where you live?
Yeah, Valley Sports North, Valley Sports Wisconsin.
There you go. Lucky man. Yeah, man. I mean, it's hard to argue with any of that, right? Like, Churio, incredibly excited. What I'm glad you said, like, the brought up the like question marks piece, because one thing that's not like specifically minor league related, and I'll get back around to answering the question in a second. The Brewers did re-sign Brandon Woodruff this week to a 2-year deal. I finally saw the money on that, which was
just
did you see it?
Well, I would say it just came out this evening, but like I told you earlier, I'm so far behind that it came out this afternoon. I think it's a great deal for both.
I will be absolutely over the moon with both that deal and the finances on it were I a Brewers fan. I think it was $2 million year 1, $5 million year 2, mutual option in the third year for $20 million with a $10 million buyout potentially. Right. Like, that's a no-brainer.
So he's guaranteed like $17 million, which is more than he would have been guaranteed through arbitration. He's not going to pitch. So I just think there was a lot of, and I was questioned right away, why would the Brewers do that? And it's like, well, you're paying to oversee his rehab.
Yep.
And then you're going to spread 2 years or 1 year of money over 2 years, which is actually not what they did. They backloaded this sucker.
Yeah, they did.
And so to me, it's a great deal for the Brewers and a really good deal for Woodruff because he's guaranteed $17 million. You don't even really know what he's going to be back as. So I like that, team friendly and player friendly, and has a chance to then make more money afterwards if he gets it done. So good move.
100%. And for Brewers folks who are wondering about that strategy, that is something the Twins have done a bunch in much lower stakes situations. They did a like oversee your rehab deal with Michael Pineda. They did an oversee your rehab deal with Chris Paddock, who's going to be a big part of their rotation this year. The reason I think the Woodruff deal is interesting, and you brought up the fact that, like, and we talked about this, I think, last week, the Brewers are one of the teams with potentially like the widest range of outcomes in all of baseball this year. It feels like even if they have a rough 2024, they're really well set up for 2025. They have an incredibly strong system. Guys like Churio, like, even if he struggles when he first comes up, he's going to have time to make his adjustments this year, and potentially folding Brandon Woodruff back into the rotation in 2025 for next to nothing while you're getting your next wave of like high A to double A prospects ready to contribute. Feels like the Brewers could be a real problem in 2025, whilst also being competitive in 2024. So I like the spot they're in a ton.
And no trade clause in the contract.
And no trade clause. Like, wow. Jealous. For me, to answer this question directly, I got to go Mizrowski. And I'm really interested. I'm like really taken with prospects at the moment for whom there's like a really obvious question about them, and he's mine, right? Like, the stuff is ridiculous. Saw 3 levels in the minors in 2023, struck out 110 in 71.1 innings. Like, what even is that? But he also walked 42 guys, right? So can he show the improvements to the control and the command to go with like probably the loudest stuff, like tied with Skeens in the minors? If he can, he's going to be an absolute problem. And like worst case scenario, you have probably an incredibly effective, like Yuan Duran-esque high leverage reliever at the back of your bullpen for the next 6 years. I can't wait to see Mizrowski.
Which it also frees up, if the Brewers aren't great in 2024, frees up moving their closer, which is a luxury on a bad team. And so that's another, there's a lot of just storylines waiting to be written here as a Brewer fan. And that's, sometimes that's not great, but makes the season fun.
Agreed. All right, let's move on to number 5. Okay, so the first place we diverged. Number 5, you had Brock Wilken, third baseman drafted out of Wake Forest, their first round pick in 2023. I had newly acquired left-handed pitcher DL Hall. So this is our first place where we've split, right? And you didn't rank Hall, and I'm assuming that's because he's debuted already. So I guess my question to you is, I guess 1, is that accurate? And 2, if you did rank him, what kind of range or roughly where are you putting him on this list?
Yeah, so I guess different places have different rules as far as what a prospect is. And so, I mean, when I pull up some prospect lists, if I don't see him on the list, I just assume that he's exceeded the innings or the service time or whatever. Like I mentioned before, I was high on Hall last year when he got called up to the Orioles. And so I would probably, without giving it, too much thought, I would probably say he would have been 5, maybe 4 for me.
Okay.
But because he isn't a prospect, I didn't have him on there. So Brock Wilken, and as it turns out, I have Wilken a little bit higher than you, and I didn't love that selection when they made it. Right, the Wilken selection, for me, it wasn't a thrilling pick. Like it was like, what else are the Brewers going to do? And then after the Brewers did all their other things, it was like, God, that was a solid way to start the draft.
Yeah.
And so I'm coming around on Wilken. He's one of many dudes that can maybe play third base.
So many, so many guys.
But is that, like, to me, that'll work itself out. And I think that's okay. He struggled at AA, right? He destroyed the other 2 levels, gets to AA, doesn't play a ton there, wasn't very good.
Right.
But I think there's enough to really like the power. He didn't show it a ton as a pro, but showed it an absolute ton of Wake Forest.
Oh my God.
And if he can stay at third, I mean, there's the makings of a 3 or 4 hitter, right? And if everything clicks for him, the trajectory of him as a prospect is going to absolutely fly. And you already have Tyler Black. Now you have Brock Wilken. It's like, to me, those 2 are comparable prospects. So I think it just made sense for me to back them up at 4 and 5, because there's not a lot in between them. And I think Wilken, with more at bats, he played a huge long season last year, right? You play all these games, and then you immediately turn around after playing. And I think we've talked about this. You play in the College World Series, and then all of a sudden you're showing up at low A and high. Like, this is not the same environment. You got to get yourself recalibrated. And so I think after getting a spring training, getting a normal year, Wilken's the type of guy that we could see really fly up boards. And that's why I liked him at that spot. But yeah, if Hall would have been someone that was considered a prospect on my list, I'd have probably had Hall at 4 or 5 and dropped Wilken down a run.
So a couple of things on what you said that I want to pick up on. I can't argue with really any of that, and I do think like Wilkins, a guy we've seen right as a like most likely guys to be a top 100 prospect in 2025. Like he's on all those lists already, and I think that makes a ton of sense. Um, the reason I put Hall on there, regardless of prospect eligibility, is actually kind of just a show of faith in the Brewers' ability to develop pitching. And they have specifically come out and said, we see DL Hall as a starter. We talked about this a little bit last week, so I'm not going to go over it, right? But like some of the nastiest, like stuff wise, like on Eno Saris, like stuff plus boards, you're going to see his fastball up there. You're going to see a lot of his pitches up there. And I really think of any organization he could go to, the Brewers would absolutely be in like the top 5 in terms of like giving him a shot to start and stay as a starter. And so I think that's got to be one of the Brewers storylines of the spring. And it's something I'm really curious about. Like, how do you message to a guy who's new to your organization? What are their kind of developmental goals while you're also trying to make them feel comfortable in a new organization and feel comfortable with the role? I agree on Wilkin. It's often, I'm not saying you did this, but it's often something we do, right? When we look at prospects is we say, ooh, they got like a 15 game sample at like AA at the end of the season and they struggled. I really love when organizations take that approach of being aggressive with a guy right at the end of the season, because I want a guy to see the next level and start to understand the necessary adjustments that need to be made in order to be successful there. So I would always rather see a guy pushed, maybe even a little bit beyond their means at the end of a season, if it means that they go into the offseason with a clearer picture of like, ooh, these are the adjustments I need to make in order to be successful at AA in 2024.
Yeah, and I think, and this is kind of getting off that track, but the minor leagues, the domestic reserve list has been reduced, right? So there's going to be less minor leaguers in every organization. And you think of the amount of non-roster invites that end up at AAA, and that just it pushes down the prospects, a level usually to start the year. But if we're eliminating all these spots, now you've really kind of pushed up the prospects. And so with a guy like with Wilkin, it's like, okay, if we push him to AA and he struggles really, really badly, does that mean we want to start him the next year at high A? Or if he shows well in the sample, that we push him just to try to give the organization, you're talking about the player and I'm talking about the organization, right?
Yep.
Give the organization an idea of, okay, where do we want to start him? Because that gives us an idea of how many spots we have, if it's going to be a AAA guy, or if it's going to be let's take a flyer on this guy in the Rule 5 minor league draft to plug it at single A. Because is it reduced by like 15 players organization?
That's down to like 165, I think, total.
Yeah, it's a significant amount that and I had read stuff about how teams are having a harder time, with these non-roster guys, just because if they don't make the major league team, you can't just plug them all in at AAA. You're gonna have to cut. You're not cutting from your organizational prospect list that you think still has a chance. So there's more that goes into that with the roster maneuvering. So I'm excited to see how that plays out. But I think it works hand in hand there with your guys getting a taste at AA.
For sure. Okay, let's move on, cover a couple more guys, and then we'll dig into another guy who actually had a chance to write about in the last week or so. So number 6, you had Luis Lara, outfielder. I had Joey Ortiz, recently acquired shortstop from the Baltimore Orioles. Figures to contribute to the team right away. Number 7, you had Ortiz. I had left-handed pitcher Robert Gosser. And then 8, I had Luis Lara here, so a similar clustering, and you had Cooper Pratt. And I want to ask you about Pratt for a couple of reasons. One, he's top of mind for me because I just did a prospect preview on him at Brewer Fanatic just like a week or so ago. I know that in general, we're both high on him. I think you have him a little higher than other places I've seen, like industry lists for the Brewers top 20, top 30. And so, I noticed it's a little bit of a trend, I think, in your list that you favor some of the guys they drafted in 2023. And we've both spoken a ton about how we loved their draft. Do you think that's fair that you're favoring recently drafted guys? And then what is it that appeals to you about Pratt so much as a prospect?
Yeah, I think in all my prospect lists over the course of forever, I've always skewed towards upside. And so that's maybe pushing high school guys a little bit higher than they should be, pushing college guys that have shown something a little higher than they should be. And maybe it's not even that they should be higher than people that are less risk takers, right? You don't want to look like an idiot. So, I mean, I had Corey Lewis, I think, in my top 20 last year when he hadn't really done much. There's some other examples, but I'd have to pull out some old Twins prospect handbooks where it's like you take a shot on a guy because you think there's some quality there. Well, then they don't end up panning out, but you take one with the other. I think for in general, 5 through 11 for the Brewers is really that same tier. 11 or 12. And so with Pratt, for me, upside, solid tools across the board, not super flashy yet, but I think you start to come into some of that as you mature. So you're talking about a guy that's in his first full season as a pro. And I think there's a ton to like. And once he starts to climb, people are going to appreciate other things that he does. Where does he fit? Like, is he a shortstop at 6'4"? I don't know. But if he hits, he could end up in really a lot of different spots. And I think there's athleticism enough. Doesn't really jump off the board, but there's just enough upside where it's like when you see comps, which I know you don't like, right? But the comp coming into the draft, the comp coming out of the draft, the comp now, there's still a lot of Gunnar Henderson talk. And that sometimes raises expectations too. She's talking about rookie of the year. And so it's how's he going to react to that? Is that something that he's going to buy into? You never know. There's so many different ways he could go. But I really do like him as a prospect, and I think number 8 in the system is a fair spot. But really 5 through 12 for me, very similar.
Yeah, I think that's fair, and that's kind of reflected in our lists too, right? And for me, like, I don't have like Pratt super low. I have him at 11. So like well within the range, but I think that to me says a lot more about how insane the Brewer system is at the moment than about Cooper Pratt. Like, he's had a handful of games as a professional. That's it. And it's more using something like that as a separator for me when we're starting to pick hairs, to your point about guys being in a similar range. I do think Pratt is a bit unusual for a prep prospect. And like when we're talking about evaluating prospects, you often hear this kind of thought that he doesn't have a carrying tool, right? And I think often we can interpret that as like kind of a criticism or like, oh, there's no like outstanding thing. But in his case, I actually would argue that that's a compliment. There's a ton of ways he can accrue value. Like, he's a really good athlete. Maybe he's not going to stick at short forever. At worst, he's going to be potentially like a good to really good third baseman defensively. The hit tool is definitely there. He has enough speed, savvy base runner. I think to your Gunnar Henderson comp, there's absolutely room for more power for a guy who's, I think he's up to 6'5" now. Like, he's just a tall, athletic, still growing dude. And so no carrying tool for me for Pratt is just like, yeah, because everything's pretty good. And that's exciting. So yeah, I feel you. I definitely can get on board with him at 8. I have him at 11, but I agree that this after that top 4, potentially top 5, were pretty much identical. I think these guys are mostly interchangeable, and that says a lot about the enviable position the Brewers are in overall.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, let's knock out a couple more guys. Number 9, in keeping with your 2023 draft theme, you have Josh Noth. Smaller right-handed pitcher, insane ability to spin the baseball. Sidebar about Josh Noth. While I was writing him up for his prospect preview, I found out he had a 19K perfect game in high school. How's that? 19
Impressive.
strikeout, 19 strikeout perfect game. I had Wilkin at 9. 10 for you, outfielder Yoferi Rodriguez. I had right-handed pitcher Carlos Rodriguez. 11, you had left-handed pitcher Robert Gosser, who I had a little bit higher. I had Pratt at 11. And then 12, you had Eric Brown Jr., who you've listed as a third baseman. I think he would list himself as a shortstop still. We'll call it infielder.
Yeah.
And I had Yoferi Rodriguez here at 12. So I do want to touch on him a little bit because I think for people who are really plugged into the Brewer system, like I think if our friend Spencer Michaelis was here, he would be ready to gush about Yoferi Rodriguez a little bit. What are you most excited about for him as a prospect? And what kind of timeline do you think we're looking at on Rodriguez? Because he's, kind of on the lower rungs of their minor league system compared to some of the other guys we've been talking about.
Right. And again, I think, maybe sometimes it's not fair because prospects get stuck on comparisons. And so when you have a guy that you bring in on the international pool who does really, really well, you immediately want to compare him to the last guy in your system that did the same, who just happens to be the number 2 prospect in baseball.
Yeah.
And so maybe that's raised the bar for Rodriguez. But when the Brewers organization starts to compare him to Jackson Churio, that's when people are like, wait, what? And so that's that part of it. The other part of it is he's 18 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Hasn't even played a professional game in the United States. Right. And so the range of outcomes at this point is enormous. He could end up being the number 1 prospect in baseball. He could end up being a player that fizzles out before he hits AA.
Mm-hmm.
But he's shown enough to put some hope and some stake into him. He walks as much as he strikes out. He has some power. He can run. And for an 18-year-old in the Dominican League, there's nothing to not like about his game. And I think that's the part that gets him up as high as he is, because there's certainly upside. But when you're talking 18-year-old, he's not going to make the Churio ascension. At least you wouldn't think. So, I mean, you're talking 3-4 years away. And if he comes before then, you're talking about a top 25 prospect. So the range of outcomes is just way too great right now to say he's more than where he is. You have him at 12. I have him at 10. I think that's fair.
Yeah. And I mean, you've like touched on this already, right? But I do feel like this is worth naming too. This another theme. I feel like the Brewers are a team or an organization for whom it is relatively easy to pull out certain themes of things that they're doing well or tendencies that they have. For example, we always like to talk about how in the draft they love taking a JUCO guy. The Brewers are crushing in a national prospect development and identification. I think like maybe more than any other organization, the amount of dudes they have taken in recent seasons has been amazing. And so to your point about like range of outcomes, 100% agreed. Like could flame out for a AA, could become a consensus top 100 prospects. But if we look at the Brewers' recent track record, it makes me much more confident in their ability to develop Rodriguez into a dude. And when we had Ben Badler on a couple of weeks ago talking about the international signing period and just how complicated that is, one of the things that he brought up, which really kind of resonated with me, was just like, you don't know when guys are going to pop and take that kind of development leap, whether that is like a physical leap or a skill leap, or for pitchers like a velo leap or a stuff leap or whatever, because you're IDing and coming to pre-contract agreements with these guys at like 14, 15. But the Brewers seem to have cracked that code in recent seasons. They've got Churio, Caro, Lara, Rodriguez. Like, it's just like amazing prospect after amazing prospect. So Yoferi Rodriguez is miles away, but Hitting 253, 393, 449 is an incredibly promising start. And I also think one other underrated thing that's true about the Brewers system at the moment is they have a nice smattering of guys kind of at every like strata or level of their system, right? They have like the double A, triple A guys who are ready to contribute. They have another crop a little bit further down. Rodriguez is kind of on the bottom rung of that, but you want a balanced system with guys throughout to keep the system strong in the coming years. And the Brewers definitely have that.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, let's move on to 13. So we're at number 13. You have here another 2023 draftee, third baseman Eric Batanti. I have Noth here. So again, we're in a similar spot. I do actually want to touch on both of these guys. So let's start with Noth. I think we both love him. And maybe we disagree a little bit more on Batanti. Tell me a little bit about your thoughts on Noth, like coming into the draft and then post draft coming into 2024 here.
Yeah, so I mean, I was high on him pre-draft. He was one of the guys I wrote up as just a pitcher of interest for really anybody. The problem is he'll never shake that tag of being an undersized pitcher. But
for real,
his spin rates were freaky, right? And the name that often was associated with him was Lance McCullers.
I actually like that comp.
And
I do like that. It's a good comp.
Theo needs to clip that so
he's a smaller guy.
Yeah. So, but that's the thing. If he's even 90% or 80% of Lance McCullers, he's a Major League Baseball player.
Yeah.
And so I think that to me is, again, it's an upside thing. Like there could be, he could finish 25% of Lance McCullers Jr. and not make it in a double A. But when you're looking for pitchers, if you can spin the ball, you can teach them how to do a lot of other things too. So I like him. I had him at 9. You had him at 13. And again, I think around the top 10 is a fair place to have him.
For sure, agree. I'm going to say this. I don't have anything to add. I agree with all of that. I even like the Lance McCullers comp. Of the teams that we talk about the most often, I think Noth is like one of the top 3 minor league guys I'm most excited to see in 2024, just how he looks on the pitching side. Like it's like him and Charlie Soto, and we'll save room for someone else. That's what I'm most excited about. Like I cannot wait to see what Noth's curveball looks like in pro ball, just making people look foolish. It's going to be amazing. Okay, let's talk a little bit about Batanti. He was another benefactor of the Brewers draft strategy where they went like underslot for a gazillion guys in a row, including Noth, right? And they ended up very roughly paying Batanti and Pratt about $1 million over slot each. I'm curious what you think of Batanti. I have some concerns about his profile. I think it's like a boom or bust profile, right? I would maybe compare it to like a Brandon Winokur on the Twins of like incredibly loud tools. Exit velocities are like gaudy. He's a really tall, like incredibly athletic dude. I think he's like 6'4", 6'5". Is he going to? There's definitely some swing and miss concerns. Only had a smattering of games in rookie ball at the end of last season, and I am wondering about the swing and miss, maintaining the directness in his swing, and just worried about the bat to ball skills being an inhibitor of his overall offensive profile. And I'm curious whether he's a guy that you're higher on or whether you have the same kind of concerns about him as I do.
Well, I think you're spot on with that assessment. But the thing for me, and if you're a team with not great farm system and you're drafting 80 whatever and you take him, I question that because it's like if he doesn't pan out, you don't have other dudes. Mm-hmm. This particular organization has a lot of dudes.
That is true.
And so when you can take the risk of really swinging for the fences, understanding that you might miss, and that's a great metaphor for this guy, that's a risk worth taking, because if you hit, now it's like we have 7 third basemen who could be major league third basemen, and we've just
So many.
stacked them up like pancakes. I think with Eric Brown, I didn't mean to list him as a third baseman. It was just like third baseman, third baseman, third baseman, third
Just in
baseman.
a habit.
He could be, and when you said Winokur, I hadn't made that connection, but I think you're right on. Like Brandon Winokur for the Twins, if he doesn't hit, not a huge deal. We got all these other outfielders.
Mm-hmm.
If Batanti doesn't hit, not a big deal. We got all these other third basemen. But if you can hit on kind of that lotto ticket, that becomes a really big deal for the organization. Plus, I think even if he doesn't hit right away, because he really struggled as a pro, other teams were certainly interested in him.
For
And
sure.
if you're in a position at some point to make additions, you can deal from this and have strong prospects like that. Did I maybe go a little high at 13? Maybe. To me, it's that next tier, which usually when you get into that third tier of prospects, it's a pretty wide range. And I think
Yeah.
maybe everybody from 13 on to 21, maybe through 25 or 26, because my original list was 30, is all kind of in that third tier. And I think of that tier, his upside's probably the highest.
Yes.
His floor is relatively low.
Yeah. Yep. That makes sense. And I think he's going to be an interesting follow in 2024 no matter what. Like, it's going to be incredibly entertaining, right? Like, there's going to be a lot of strikeouts. When he connects with the ball, is going to go miles and miles and miles. I'll be really interested to see how he's able to adjust when he starts seeing pro pitching more consistently, because he did only get a handful of games at the end of last season.
And I'm pretty sure he's considerably younger than like Cooper Pratt. I think Pratt's 19 already, and Batanti's recently turned 18.
I could be wrong, but I think Batanti was 17. I think Batanti and Noth were both 17 on draft day. Two of the younger guys. That'll play nicely as a little bonus point or two in a draft model. So
Mm-hmm.
I think you're spot on that. Okay, now we're gonna, to your point, right? So okay, so Theo always comes through. He said Batanti turned 18 on November 17th. So you're spot on, man. He's 18 in 3 months or so. So yeah, Pratt will be 20 in August. So you're absolutely right. I mean, that's a completely different ballpark. Okay, so we're in this like third tier, right? So we're gonna do 14. We're gonna kind of split it into two. We're gonna do like 14 through 18, and then tack on a last couple of guys. I think we ended up at 21 rather than 20, which is fine because there's plenty to talk about. And we're gonna touch on one guy who you have on your list who I don't, and then I think we're each gonna highlight one guy from the, we'll call it like 15 to 20 range, who we're really interested in, who maybe is kind of like flying a little bit under people's radars. And then I might hit you with some bonus questions if we got time, and we'll call it a day. So 14, you have Carlos Rodriguez, right-handed pitcher. I have Batanti at 14. 15, you have Mike Bovee, third baseman, drafted in 2023 out of the University of Nebraska, Omaha. I have Eric Brown Jr. at 15. 16, you have Oliver Dunn, second baseman. I have Daniel Gallarte, shortstop, second baseman. At 17, you have Logan Henderson, right-handed pitcher. I have Bradley Blaylock, right-handed pitcher. And then 18, watch me butcher this pronunciation. You have Yadher Aranaimo, second baseman, third baseman, and I have Bovee at 18. So I didn't have Aranaimo ranked at all. He didn't make my top 20. Tell me what you like so much about him and why he made the cut on the backside of the top 20.
So you may or may not be saying his name right. I don't even know. I'm not even going to try. So the thing for me was another young dude, performed well with the bat, doesn't hit for much power, doesn't walk much, also doesn't strike out much, but his carrying tool is his defense. And so basically I was like, where would I rank Noah Miller if Noah Miller could get himself out of a wet paper bag?
Hater.
And And for me, and that's tongue in cheek, right? Noah Miller is the top of the
That's
class when it
the
comes to
best
my.
defender in the minors, literally.
Yep. And so I think that there's value in that when you can do some of the other things. Is he going to be more than maybe, um, you know, I'm trying to think of the names escape me, but some of these guys that like Pedro Florman, defensive wizards, utility type guys, Ari Adrianza, utility type guys. That there's certainly value in that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that that's where he kind of fits in that next tier prospects as a defensive utility type. If he can hit it all of a sudden the trajectory goes up. So I liked him. 18 for me, but really in that tier where there's a lot of other guys that were interchangeable.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, to your point, right? Like, I think cutting a list, especially with a system like the Brewers, cutting a list at 20 is kind of a challenging thought exercise. I would bet that we could take guys in like the 18 to 25, maybe even to 18 to 30 range and find some interchangeability in that tier there. So I like that we had some kind of discrepancies there. 19, you had Daniel Gallardo. I had Logan Henderson. And then 20 and 21, we did a bonus because the Brewers had loaded. We actually both had consistent 20th and 21st overall prospects. Luke Adams, number 20, third baseman, and then Dylan O'Ray, second baseman / outfielder at 21 overall. So here's how I want to kind of cap off the top 20 chat. I want to ask you, Jeremy, give me a guy in the 15 to 20 range who you are most excited to watch in 2024 and why. And that could be he's flying under the radar, could be a unique trait. Who's a guy that you want to spotlight that we're not talking about enough?
So Oliver Dunn was the name that immediately jumped off the page to me. Afterthought with the Yankees for a number of years, was the last pick of the minor league phase of the Rule 5 draft. In 2022 it would have been, and I think it was like the 5th round. So I mean, teams had opportunity after opportunity after opportunity to pick him and didn't. He went to the Phillies, had a really good season with the Phillies, and then went to the AFL and was really good as well. Really secured his spot on a 40-man. It just wasn't going to be with the Phillies. The Brewers make a move to him to their 40-man, and he's going to get a chance to compete for big league at bats. So how his story plays out, it's impossible to say, but it's one of those stories that you love to see. And if he is able to get a cup of coffee in the majors or have a legitimate major league career, who knows? But at this point, it's a fun story and one that I'm excited to watch play out in 2024.
I like that pick. I feel like you're way more plugged into the internal cogs of the 40-man roster than I am, and how those kind of pieces play together with the Rule 5 draft and how organizations accrue value on the margins. That's an interesting pick. I'm gonna go with Logan Henderson, a guy who we both had top 20. You actually had him ranked a little higher than me, but I mean we're in the same range here, right? He's a really interesting dude. For folks who aren't familiar, 4th round pick in 2021, right-handed pitcher, definitely fits in the kind of undersized category at 5'11", a tick under 200 pounds. He's been moved along slowly, pitched 78 innings, around 78 innings at low A in 2023, and just really strong performance. Walked under 3 guys per 9, struck out over 12 per 9 as a starter, started 18 games. And he has that really analytically friendly pitch mix that I think is interesting, right? So the big ride fastball that plays really well up in the zone. I think his signature secondary pitch is a ridiculous changeup. Just one of those wiffle ball changeup that just drops right at the end, a ton of separation on that pitch from his fastball, 13 miles an hour, but maintains the same arm speed. Ton of fade on that. Total bat misser, throws that to lefties and righties. So he has kind of emerged as a potentially interesting starting pitching prospect with the eternal question that faces so many starting pitching prospects. Can they develop a reliable third pitch? In this case, like a really consistent breaking ball that he can leverage. But Logan Henderson, really great 2023. Excuse me, someone I'll be really interested to track in 24. And like he's like we're talking about him as like 18th, 19th overall. Boy, or Brewers fan spoiled, man. I'm jealous. Not gonna lie. All right, man. I got one bonus question for you before we get out of here. I've decided to keep this in. And I did not tell you we were going to do this before we got on here. The prospect in the Brewers system most likely to be a consensus top 100 prospect first, who currently is not one. Who you got?
So, I mean, Brock Wilken was my first prospect, my highest prospect listed. That's not a consensus top 100 guy.
Oh.
So I feel like that to me is pretty low hanging fruit. But I'm high on Luis Lara too, and there's some exciting skills that he has that could potentially see him leapfrog his way into a top 100. Because the reality is, when you have prospects, when you have a lot of good prospects, there's eyes on those teams. And when you're watching the Caros and the Mizorowskis, and then other dudes start to pop, you're like, hey, how about that guy? That might fly under the radar on a team that doesn't have the same success, because I would guess most teams that have good prospects, or most organizations that have good prospects, have good teams, right?
Mm-hmm.
And those guys get the eyes. So those are the two that really are maybe the most favorites. But I do think Rodriguez has a shot, right, as kind of a dark horse. And I really do think Noth has a chance to, maybe not next year, but in the next 2 years, has a chance to really jump up these lists too. I love that 2023 draft, man. And it's
great. It's great. Dude, I mean, the fact that, so I'm even going to throw a different name in the mix real quick. I think Pratt could be a top 100 prospect by the end of the season if he has a healthy 2024 season, if he makes it through like 2 levels this year, right? There's absolute, like, he was a top, I forget where he was on the consensus board, and I don't want to like misquote, but he was absolutely like a top 160 something, maybe,
right? Yep,
60 something, like in a ridiculous class. Like he was a high pedigree prospect coming into that like historically strong draft class. He could absolutely be a low end top 100 guy at the end of the season. And we've now named like 4 guys in the Brewers top 20 who could be top 100 prospects by the end of this season if they're healthy and have a productive season. That's how you know that you're doing something right. I'd be ecstatic if I was a Brewers fan going into the season about the future of the organization. It's looking good.
That's what's important. If you're a Brewers fan of the major league team, there's a little less to be excited about. If you follow prospects, if you follow the future, I think that's more fun. Because the reality is if you're following the big league team and you lose your manager, right? You've traded your ace. Your other ace is on the shelf.
For sure.
Now you hear about this bright, shiny prospect that's going to be great. He will be great. It might take some time. And so you have to be patient. Prospects don't always turn out. The Brewers' window's maybe closed for a bit, but that window could certainly fly open. The NL Central, though, man,
it's going to be wild. The NL Central farm systems, like, also there's so much talent loaded in that division in terms of the best prospects in baseball. And I do want to I've been talking about this forever. I do want to talk about like best prospects on other teams. Speaking of other teams, next week, we're going to move on to the Cubs. So we got to do a quick teaser for the Cubs episode because, right, people were reporting to spring training. no secret that one Pete Crow Armstrong, who I lamented not getting many plate appearances at the end of last season, is going to be the Cubs' #1 prospect heading into 2024. Did you see his new do? Have you
I
seen
did.
it? Can we get a picture? Is there any way? Here we go. What do you think of that, man? I noticed that you showed up with a haircut today, and looks very nice.
There's so much wrong with that.
I'm wondering wow, like I don't even know what to do with that. Like, who does he look like? Someone said he looks like the angry kid from Toy Story.
Okay.
Like the kid who torches the toys from Toy Story.
Yep.
But I'm interested in other like comps. We'll open this up for comps on the hair.
Who's the YouTube guy that always had the purple spiky hair? Super popular a couple years ago.
You're asking me a question that is designed for young people.
Yeah, your kids aren't old enough. I don't know. Is he trying to be Marcus Smart? Is he trying to be the first reply there says bro thinks he's a Monroe St. Brown?
I don't know. I'm
And
not
then
feeling it.
Is there like a line shaved in there? Does he have a line? Like, was he trying to go darker? There's just so many questions that I don't know.
Thea says, "Yep, there's a line." I don't know about that.
There's I don't know. But hey, here's the deal. You show up like that. You show up in a pink Barbie doll machine like Lance Lynn. You better walk it, because this is the talk. And
I can't wait. I can't wait to actually see him get some plate appearances this season. We're ready.
He's just got to hit. Maybe the blue hair brings the power, and
there
he
you
hits. Because if not, he's just a Smurf.
Anyway, that's a tease for next week. What more could you want? We will dig further into Pete Crow Armstrong's hair, and also another ridiculous system. Excited to rank the Cubs alongside you. As always, appreciate folks for engaging with the show. Thanks for giving us a listen. Appreciate any ways that you guys can support the podcast, and we will be back next week with a Cubs top 20. Until then, enjoy a first batch of spring training games, and we'll see you next week.